Hello, everybody, and welcome to Episode 6 of Politics. Today I'm here with Alex, as well as myself, Bo, because no one else could make it today. Okay,
And I just want to point out, it's a massive disappointment that we don't have the rest of the gang here. Because, as much as I love talking to you, but it's nice to have, other opinions on the
yeah.
podcast.
Oh well, it's almost like people have lives, and they're probably doing fun things on on Saturday evening, and we're here recording a podcast about politics. All right, so on that less depressing note, let's talk about the impeachment of the 45th president of the United States.
I love how you're making a massive deal out of this.
Yeah, not like anything's gonna happen, but okay, so the president was impeached on Friday. On articles of impeachment of the abuse of power of the office of the president, as well as the Article 2, which was the obstruction of Congress. The vote was right along party lines, with 230 Democrats voting in favor of passing the first article, and 229 Democrats voting in favor of passing the second, with Republicans dissenting and voting nay or no, depending on which article, because to make it even more confusing, Congress has to use two different terms. But this again, as what we've proven with our other discussions of impeachment, despite the fact that evidence is there, in my opinion at least, it's right along party lines again. Democrats are decrying the president, saying he's guilty of treason, yada yada yada. However, the Republicans are continuing to back their president, which has created quite a lot of controversy with multiple Democratic candidates, including Representative Tulsi Gabbard, who chose to vote present in both article votes, which is interesting, as she wanted to, I suppose, be seen as nonpartisan in her act, as she's been considered more of a right-leaning Democrat, or choosing to stay in the moderate as opposed to others who've gone further left. But Alex, are you surprised at all about the way everybody voted?
No. This is coming. It's like we knew that he was going to get impeached as soon as the impeachment inquiry was open.
Exactly.
It was just going to happen. Exactly. There was only one time somewhere in late October and November where we had some Democrats coming out. It's like, what do we do? Do we open this up to everything that he's done in the past, or do we just keep it to what they did here? And I feel like to get the votes and to make sure that everything went according to plan for the Democrats, they did this. And it's like, yes, you had a few two Democrats, or three Democrats, depending on which vote you look at, that voted against the Democratic Party. We always forget about Justin Amash, the former Republican who voted for impeachment. It's like, so you could see the Republicans just had, when somebody dissented from their ranks, they just removed him from the party, even though he wasn't a moderate Republican. No, he was a member of Freedom Caucus and such. So it's like, you see, it is very much split by party lines, and nobody's surprised at all. But you have I want to talk about Tulsi Gabbard and her vote of president, and it's like, what's the point at this point? Like, okay, what are you trying to achieve by voting present? Are you being an independent, which you're not? You are party affiliated, and when she is running on the Democratic ticket, and if you don't support the party, like,
Right.
vote against it. It just shows indecisiveness, and I personally, from a theoretical standpoint, if you're constantly showing indecisiveness, well, how can you be a leader when you're indecisive about something like this? And also at the same time, she's making the point that Republicans should be making, where it's like, yes, he did something wrong, but I don't believe that it reaches impeachment level standards.
Right,
That's kind of
right.
would be
And
the easiest way for the Republicans to get out.
the Republicans have framed it as, oh, he's done nothing wrong, he's innocent. I agree with you. I think that this argument, the whole argument should be, it was unethical, but is it illegal? And they haven't made that argument. But back to Gabbard, this is perplexing to me. She's very behind in the election. She didn't even qualify for the debate. She didn't even qualify for the debate that we'll be talking about in a minute. She's been seen. She's been ostracized from the beginning because of her relations with Bashar al-Assad, her more right-leaning politics in the Democratic Party, and she has a chance to kind of distinguish herself as like, yeah, I'm for impeachment, like we're down with the president, I'm with the Democrats, and instead she votes present, which, like Alex was saying earlier, it's not a dissent against the party, it's not an approval of the party, it's just like, I'm here. And she might as well be running as an independent at that point because she just gets further ostracized from the party. I just find that very perplexing, and it seems like she is almost like surrendering in the race, that she knows she can't win, so she's not even going to try to make a difference. That's just confusing to me. I don't get it, because I guarantee you when the Senate vote comes out, if it gets that far, that Amy Klobuchar and Senator Warren and Senator uh, Sanders will be casting a vote one direction or another, and not choosing to remain present. So I don't get it. It's not like it's trying to be, oh, I'm a candidate, I can't influence, from here. It's just like you said earlier, indecisiveness. She just doesn't want to ruffle feathers, so instead she ruffled feathers by not voting one way or another.
Yeah, unless what Hillary Clinton said is true, is that she's setting up to be the third party candidate to spoil the ballot. But that I would say that's a little extreme. But like you could see that could like bring her to a path where she is the third party like a very very strong third party candidate. Because if she does get let's say 2-3% of the entire electorate during the election, like yes, that could swing it one way or another because it is very very close. So I also want to talk about what Nancy Pelosi is currently doing with those articles. So they've been voted on, but she hasn't officially given them to the Senate. So they haven't been passed on to the Senate. So that Mitch McConnell, so her play is that Mitch McConnell is not going to be just couldn't rush through a trial in 2 weeks and have no witnesses. She's trying to get Mitch McConnell to agree to some kind of a deal between the two parties. She's kind of so the Nancy Pelosi has to nominate a few members of Congress to present the case in the Senate, and she's kind of doing this thing where it's like, well, I don't know the rules that are going to be in the Senate, so I can't nominate the people who like to represent us. So yes, it's kind of he's trying to make some kind of play. It's a bit weak, but at the same time, you had Senator Chuck Schumer's letter to Mitch McConnell talking about how he wants Bolton, Mulvaney, and then two others from OMB, and I think it was Office of Chief of Staff or DOD. I can't remember exactly which one. But basically asking for as much openness as possible, and Mitch McConnell just shut it down entirely.
Well, McConnell said before even this happened that they don't even need to hear anybody. They're just going to vote that there's going to be no evidence presented. Everybody just knows he's innocent. So at this point, you need 67 senators to remove the president from office. The numbers just aren't there. You have 54 Republicans. It's not there. You don't have enough swing votes. At this point, we're kind of wasting time. I applaud the effort of the Democrats because I know it's a necessary step. I think even that's the thing. It's a huge gamble because you have the impeachment stain, quote unquote, on President Trump's presidency. That stain he shares with Clinton and Johnson, and the stain he would have shared with Nixon. So now is that going to help? the Democrats in 2020 saying like, "Oh look, he's so terrible. He was given an indictment by Congress, and he's so terrible, and we couldn't even get to vote to the Senate because McConnell wouldn't let him." Or is it going to be another Mueller report situation where Trump's base says, "Look, they tried him again. The evil Democrats went after him again because they're still mad about 2016. Trump survived again. He's the best president ever." Which I think is honestly going to be leaning towards the latter option because the Democrats have been unable to unify under this impeachment cause. They're still split between the more left-leaning socialists under the Bernie Sanders Warren and the more moderate Klobuchar Buttigieg. They're split there. They're split on impeachment because Gabbard can't make a decision. They they know they can't win the Senate, so they're being hesitant to give the articles over to the Senate. Crying foul play, but in reality, they just were trying to delay it as long as possible to try to find new evidence. And they don't have a strong candidate in 2020 yet because they can't decide what they want. So at this point, it's just, man, this just frustrates me about the two-party system in this country because we really need multiple parties. But of course, we can't do that because then no one's gonna, it's gonna be whoever splits first is gonna lose an election for 12 years.
Yeah, you're never going to get a candidate go over 270 in the Electoral College for president. Right. It's like yes, it'll be much easier because you have the majority votes in you've got first past the post votes in Congress and Senate, I believe. Whilst presidentially, it's going to be absolute hell, and no president. It was like you're going to have let's say on a very just theoretical type, if you look at it, 25% each candidate, no one's ever going to get to 270 and stalemate. It's like going back to your point where
then you have the House of Representatives deciding elections, and it's just going to be all partisan again. Yeah. It's just the fact is with the two-party system, I think the Electoral College is a good idea. I like it. I think it should definitely stay. But the two-party system now the Republican Party is experiencing the same thing. Between the more moderate Republicans of like John Kasich type, and then you have the Trump side as well. They're experiencing the same thing, but they've been able to remain more unified in this scenario, backing the president, which I think many members don't enjoy, but they need to win elections. Just the Democratic Party, and someone said this to me a couple years ago, and it's so true. The Democratic Party never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity. And they had a chance in 2016, and I think they picked the wrong candidate to run. She won the popular vote, but she lost pretty handily in the Electoral College. Now they, again, haven't decided on the candidate. And they have a chance now with the impeachment thing to, frame it as, look, this guy is diabolical, he's despicable, he's trying to cheat again. We almost caught him cheating the first time, we're going to get him this time. And instead they failed with that. And now they're trying to delay until they can get McConnell to agree to a deal, which is, again, just delaying the inevitable because this Senate won't remove it.
Reminds me a bit of House of Cards. I feel like Donald isn't a very cerebral Underwood type. You have some Senate Republicans who are in blue states and who have elections coming up in 2020, who could be swayed into giving the Democrats enough votes to change the rules of the trial. So basically, I believe that if the Democrats can get Mick Mulvaney and John Bolton up there on stand and say to the world, like, yes, Donald Trump's a bad man and they don't perjure themselves, then you're going to see a lot more public opinion shift against Trump. And that only requires 4 Republicans or 5. I can't remember. I think 5. I think that requires 5 Republicans to get to a majority, and then they can set the rules. So you had people like, for example, Mitt Romney come out and say that he wasn't comfortable, but again, he doesn't. He's somewhere in the middle. Then you've got people like Susan Collins and Cory Gardner who are up for elections and they are in blue states, and you you could persuade them, but that's like Chuck Schumer's got a big job on his hands.
Yeah, he's basically been handed a. His team's down in the bottom of the ninth and needs to score 5 runs but with 2 outs. It's just it's going to be a huge momentum because you need to convince, like I said, a two thirds to vote, and the fact that the vote is public, as most things in Congress are. I remember a couple when this all started. Somebody was like, "We can get 30 Republicans to vote against Trump if it was in private." But according to the current rules, it has to be in public. So you have people scared of losing re-election who will vote to support the president. So I mean, we're just gonna have to see. Just gonna have to see what Pelosi's next move is to deliver those articles. With hopefully she can get um, uh, McConnell to agree to a deal that'll make it more fair, not just a one-off vote that he's talked about doing before. Hopefully, we can get the democratic process to ensure, not a Democratic Party, but just democracy go through the way it's supposed to run and get a vote. But I think Alex, you agree with this. We're not expecting the president to be removed. We're expecting him to stay in office by a pretty comfortable majority, I think, and see how it plays out in 2020. But going off of party politics, let's dive into the Democrat Party politics with the debate they had last week, right in the midst of all the impeachment stuff, of course. Again,
Yeah, Bo, I salute you on your attempt for a segue, and it was very much yeah,
it was poor.
it was
It was
so hard.
poor.
It was half-hearted. It was half-hearted. You had 2020. You had Donald removing Donald Trump. It's like thing is, it's like yeah, he's not going to be removed from by being impeached, but he could be removed by one of these people. Like that. But this needs we need to put in some work, or you could just hand it off to me. But yes, the 2020 Democratic debates did happen. They happened. They happened on Thursday night in Los Angeles, and just before the debates, you had a massive issue with worker rights and workers being on strike um, with the catering company that worked at the place that they were doing the debates, and you had all candidates come forward and say that they would not participate in the debates if this worker dispute was not resolved. And so I think it was on Tuesday, like 2 days before, like they were just able to resolve it. And the funny thing is like so they had to move the place where the debate was held because of this a similar um, dispute that happened at a different location. So that's why they moved it. So now it was like getting really close up to it. Another worker dispute, and so they finally got on stage. And when they did get on stage, the seven candidates that were able to get on. Some of them, some of them did really well, and then some of them, well,
As
not so
usual,
well.
did not do very well.
So yeah, so where do you want to start? At the top or the bottom?
Let's go with the bottom. Work our way up.
So Tom Steyer, um,
He spoke
I,
for a solid 4 seconds.
yeah, no, okay. The thing is that it's it creeps me out when he in the debates he looks straight in the camera. It's so weird. It's so weird. Like because the thing is like on TV usually you have people talking to each other or like talking to somebody else, and it's like talking to camera, especially when you're delivering a speech. It's like you have all this like kind of like a gravitas of you making a speech or you making a debate point, but you're making it like very powerfully to this massive audience, but you're concentrating it straight at the viewer. And that's one of the debate techniques that I think he needs to cut out because it's not looking great. And also, in general, his um, his general demeanor compared to all the other all the other candidates was quite poor. He looked like I think there was somebody who commented on it saying that he looked like a tourist. And to be honest, that's what he is. Like he bought his way up there, And there's a lot of people in the Democratic Party who don't particularly agree with it. And you have him coming out and saying that climate change is his thing, and it's like he's pushing for it. And it's like, yeah, we understand, and so do the rest of the candidates. But the thing is, so that's the main thing he's running on, and not other policies. Like, yeah, yes, he brings forward of like we need to so what really annoys me about Starr, and this is something that like it's the thing that I just can't stand when he says. It's like, I've been fighting oil companies, I've been fighting against gas lines, I've been fighting against fossil fuel burning, burning like electricity plants. But the issue with that is that he made his billions from the coal industry. And of course, he was fighting the oil industry, main competitor. Of course, he was fighting the building of pipelines. Well, because that's where gas and oil is transported. It's like his main competitors. And then he talks about how yeah, we need to break apart the how he was fighting like fossil fuel burning plants. It's like, yes, yes, he most likely was. I don't know the exact facts, but the most efficient fossil fuel electricity plant is run on natural gas, not on coal. And you know, you just see, you could see through it. You could see through it. And so I didn't particularly like what he was doing. But do you want to go into somebody else?
Yeah, another loser, I suppose. Good old Bernie Sanders did not do so hot. He even got told by the moderator to get back on the point when he tried to pivot on a race question to talk about climate change. He is just, in 2016, he had a good shot. Many people thought he should have won the primary, but the superdelegates kicked in, picked Clinton. He ran independent, split the Democratic vote. Trump won. Now he's here to redeem himself, and instead he's getting just beaten by Warren on the same issues. Their politics are very similar. She's winning. He's just not. He's just falling behind further and further and further. His lead he was top three. He's starting to slip now. You have candidates like Bloomberg, who didn't get to debate due to the DNC's qualification standards, as well as candidates like Buttigieg and Biden starting to make a comeback now. He's just slowly slipping, and I need a. I'm not sure. Bernie ain't doing it for me this year.
Yeah. So, okay. The thing is that you've had
He just stuck to the script. He had no new things. He just said, fight the money, and then he just slipped
the
back
thing
down.
is, but that's kind of what he's running on, is that he's had this script for like the past 40 years, and he's been fighting for the same issues, trying to push for the same ideas, and he has pushed the Democratic Party to a more socialist way. And like, it is, I wouldn't say it's entirely him, but in a very large part he did push all these ideas, and he is the ideologue for a socialist view of Democratic Party. And I saw a few polls over the last few weeks that actually show Bernie above Warren, and Warren slowly slipping. And you see how we're going to go onto this a bit later about Warren and Buttigieg, but like that didn't help her, that fight between the two over the past few weeks. And you see Bernie just keeping it steady. He hasn't moved in the polls. That's the thing. And he has, it's like Donald Trump's base. Bernie has his base, and his base are going to be with him for like very, very strongly, and do support him a lot. And he's got one of the highest like favorability ratings out of everybody else. And it's like, you have he's like a solid rock, and he's your metronome. And you see that in the debate, he didn't do well. Like, I would say it was one of his worst debate performances. Usually, he's very, very good at debating. Hey, he's very good. He's very energetic. And here he just missed the mark on like these few issues. Like, for example, like when they were talking about Barack Obama's statement about how like old white men shouldn't be in charge and women would do a better job. The question was posed, and like, what do you think? Like, being the oldest candidate on stage tonight, what do you think of the statement? And then he also said, like, well, I'm also white, and it's like, I understand what he was going for, like trying to make like a bit of like a race joke. It's like, yeah, he is the old white dude. Um, from Washington, but it didn't land, and it wasn't great. And like how you pointed out, when he shifted from a racial question to a climate change question, it wasn't convincing. It was honestly not particularly convincing. And even though he did answer the like most of the other questions very, very well, and he did have a great few times, but overall, I wouldn't say he was as good as some others. Who do you want to go? Who do you want to look
Yeah.
at next? Well,
Let's talk about the mixed bag of Buttigieg. He did. He had a few good points. He talked. He had a good thing against Warren when she called him out for private fundraisers. He called her out for a purity test that she couldn't pass, which I thought was an interesting way to throw it back in her face that she's again running the platform of money's evil. But he also struggled against, Klobuchar came after him, calling out his limited experience, calling out his failure to win other races he's ran in. But he's been gaining momentum in Iowa, which has he's kind of moving his way up in the charts, and it's worrying candidates like Warren and Biden and Sanders, as he has that potential that they're seeing the potential to slingshot himself up. And he handled the heat fairly well, although he could have done better. But I think he's secured himself at probably fourth place, third place in the polls after last night. Uh, but I mean, he just had a very average debate performance, which I think is good for him. He doesn't need to be, he has a couple zingers here and there, but the main thing is he just needs to remain status quo, not slipping like Biden had done in some previous debates. But speaking of Joe Biden, he turned it on. He actually was able to compete for once and didn't look like he didn't know where he was. He had some just very obvious gaps in the first couple of debates that were just very uncharacteristic of Biden. It just seemed like, what's going on there? But he seemed to have fixed it. He was on point. He took a couple shots at Bernie Sanders. He talked about his bipartisanship. He's been doing well. I was actually thoroughly surprised that he was able to flip it back and drive some momentum home, especially in states like South Carolina and Nevada, where he's looking to win those early states.
yeah, no, I agree. With Joe specifically, he didn't have a single gaffe, and he had one of those debate performances that what some commentators were talking about, how it was reminiscent of how he used to debate when he was younger, and he was a bit more aggressive. He had a small thing where he told Bernie to put his hand down, um, and it was a solid debate performance. You didn't have anyone attack him per se. Didn't have too much altercations with others, and like, you know I think I think it was good for him not to be talking as much, and kind of we've seen this before, where his staff members have come out to speak that, like, well, they haven't come out, they've said privately that we're trying to keep him away from the camera as much as possible because he's doing really well right now, and he's staying popular, and we want to maintain that. And because most of his popularity comes from name recognition, he doesn't need, like, he needs to campaign, but he doesn't need to campaign that as much as other candidates. Um, it's I felt like he was very strong on foreign affairs, where he was talking about when the question was about the Afghanistan papers, and he was talking about how he was very much against the troop surge under Obama and against interventionism, even though he did vote for Iraq, but he kind of like turned it around and to show that like he kind of like learned something from it. But that's kind of me taking two steps away from what he actually said. So it's like, and yeah, but the thing is, his Afghanistan answer was very, very, very strong, I'd say. All right, do you want to move on to
Another strong can. Well, we didn't talk about Klobuchar and Yang yet.
Yeah, no,
It's
I was gonna ask which candidate you want to move on to next. You don't have to get aggressive with me, pal.
Boo. Andrew Yang, solid debate performance. He he finally got to speak for once, which is such a problem with these debates. But there, he got on. He had a great line about him being the only non-white candidate. An honor and a disappointment, he said, which is true. Kamala Harris is out. Gabbard didn't qualify. Uh, Cory Booker didn't qualify. Most of the minority candidates have dropped out or didn't qualify. So it's good to see there's still some diversity there on the stage. And he also had a very great answer about special needs children, as one of his sons is autistic. He definitely had a good performance. He also had some funny lines about men are morons, which was received well by the crowd. But he did well. He was finally able to shine a little bit where he's been overshadowed in some other debate stages. He's finally able to get out there and show what he's about. But he's really distinguished himself in this debate as being just the non-politician. His answers are always far out. They're always kind of zany, which has done really well for his campaign because he's trying to be the non-politician.
Yeah, he's the funniest candidate on stage. It's like, yes, you have Bernie with a little bit of like a few dad jokes, but Yang is just funny, and he answers question. He had, I think it was, I can't remember exactly if it was either his opening or a closing statement where he's like, well, you guys are wondering like, why am I even here? that's how he opened his like one of his statements with, and it's like we understand like where you're coming from, and also like he hasn't gotten any like press recognition, as in like keeping him away from every point. Like when the media is talking about candidates, the two candidates that are least talked about that should be in comparison to their poll numbers are Yang and Sanders. Those are the two that are getting not the least coverage, but they're getting an unproportionately less number. I don't know the exact.
Other candidates are getting covered over them.
Yes, exactly. So under that, and I think his point of how he turned the question about race and the diversity on the stage, he turned it into his main policy point, the universal income for like $1,000 a month for every American, and he said like, well, only 5% of people in the United States donate to candidates, and he talked about how to donate to candidates you need disposable income, and especially minorities and people of color don't have that, and so he kind of turned that into like, that's why we should have the universal basic income, to give people more disposable income so that we can have more of a fair economy in the world. And I felt like that was one of the strongest answers that we had the entire time. It was very, very good, and I was very surprised because usually Yang's a good debater, but he isn't something incredible, and I felt like this was a very, very strong, very, very strong very, very strong debate night for him. So, do you want to talk about the beefy people or Klobuchar? The beef.
What?
The beef between Warren and Buttigieg.
I was talking about Klobuchar, but
no, it's fine. Okay, Klobuchar had a great.
She did great. She did great. She focused on her message. She's talked a lot about how she's from the Midwest. She knows how to get things done. She's a woman. That's what she hit on. She hit home. She went after Buttigieg. She did well. She had a stand up performance that she's finally been able to do. That the stage has been reduced. She's finally been able to get out there and say what. Same with Yang. Same with Buttigieg. The field has been reduced. People can actually say some things that make them more likable candidates. And she did. She did well. She spoke. She was one of the highest, if not the most spoken candidate. She spoke a lot, and that was much different from usual, where she was usually one of the fewer least spoken candidates. But she did great, and hopefully that'll help her. Her campaign will hopefully be helped by that. But she did well. She did well.
So she was speaking for the second most amount of time. With I would say surprisingly, Sanders got the most speaking time in the debate. So she was speaking this. She spoke a lot, and what she was able to do very effectively was when two candidates were debating, were going at each other, like you had Warren versus Buttigieg. She kind of got them to stop talking and took that time, took the spotlight, and made a point about it. It was very very effective, and it showed like kind of like a powerful presence of hers, and that kind of a lead. It's like a leadership advantage that she brought. It was it was very effective, and you saw that twice between Buttigieg and Warren, and also between Sanders and Biden when there was this small altercation. She just took it out, just like stopped it, shut it down, like Big Mom was home. so so yeah, it was very. She had a very good night, and she also like pushed her water agenda forward, and I think she did really really well.
And our last candidate, I believe, would be
Warren.
Elizabeth Warren. Yeah, she was the front runner when this whole thing began. Everybody was like, Warren was the hot ticket item. She's seen some challenges now in the last couple weeks. Sanders has been consistently up there in polls. Buttigieg is starting to roar. Biden is starting to gain momentum. Even Klobuchar and Yang are starting to gain momentum. And you have Bloomberg as the outside challenger coming in. She's struggling a little bit with outside challenge, and when she went after Buttigieg, she didn't fare so well. The mayor from South Bend got her. She's just not. She's struggling a little bit, and it starts somewhere. It has to start somewhere. The decline, and she was the real hot topic item when she came out with here's policy plan, here's a policy plan, here's another policy plan, how I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and it's hasn't shown what she thought it was going to do. Instead of energizing people, it kind of was just like, oh, here's another policy plan from Warren, put it in the pile.
Yeah, I felt like the way that she went after Buttigieg could have been much better. There's a much better point of taking money out of politics. And if you talk about that and her like one of her main ideas is like her being an anti-corruptionist, and she's trying to push that as hard as she could, but she didn't like land the final blow on Buttigieg. And on the opposite side, you had Buttigieg, I would say, do quite well in counteracting her point. But I would say he also didn't make his point clear either, if you know what I mean. It's like they had two half points. And it felt like it sounded great. It sounded great when they were going at each other, but substantively, the fight was won by Buttigieg, I would say, between the two. And I feel like Warren needs to get it together to rise to rise in the polls a bit further, because she was falling, and from some of the polls I've read, that she is losing the white college educated voter, and they are going to Buttigieg, which is a bit strange, because you would think that if you believe in Warren's ideas but you don't like her as a person, you would go to Sanders, wouldn't you? If it's more from an entirely ideological standpoint. So this is kind of the reason why I believe that it's more of like an electability argument and more of a personality thing than anything. Um, Actually, something I wanted to mention that I forgot to mention about either Pete or Klobuchar. You had So Pete has said in past debates that yes, there's been look at this that we've got like 100 years worth of like Washington experience, and look where that's brought us. And he said something about like how nothing's done in committee rooms anymore because they're absolutely useless and Washington's useless. I'm exaggerating. I
Paraphrasing,
think
but you know,
I'm not.
that
Yeah,
was
I'm
that
paraphrasing.
was the last debate. He was pretty much like,
Yeah,
we need an
and
outsider,
Klobuchar,
not the
yeah, and
outsider.
Klobuchar like very well. She put it very very well, in that she called it out and being like, "Well, I've passed over 100 bills where I'm the lead, and I've done this, I've done this." She's like laying out her like experience and how she and how it does matter, because you need to know how that like bureaucracy and how all that works for you to be able to govern there. And it's not about having great idea, it's about how you being able to implement it. So you have you have all of that come together and creating this quite interesting debate. You had a little bit of you had a little bit of intrigue compared to the other ones, because the other ones were a bit stale, I would say. They all had stuff to talk about. They were talking about very much policy, and nobody really went after each other unless you take like the policy argument of Medicare for all versus Medicare for all who want it. You didn't you didn't have that this time here. You had a lot more personal attacks in the debate. So I would say that from this debate to something that's not a debate, because the vote happened and Boris Johnson has got his majority. So on the 12th of December, you had the UK elections in the UK, um, where you had Boris Johnson regain a majority in the House of Commons. He was able to, I would say, absolutely destroy Labour and Liberal Democrats in their homeland, which is usually considered like the Midlands in the UK. Um, it was obvious from it wasn't obvious from the polling beforehand, and he kind of outdid himself in the polls, like from what was polled to what he actually got, and that just means that Brexit is happening. They were so with it happening, with the vote and the election happening 10 days ago. You had them straight away as soon as they came in. They were able to get a Queen's speech and to do all the ceremonialities. I think that's how you say it. And were
Or
able to
ceremony, but whatever.
you know what I mean. So on Wednesday they were able to pass basically the groundwork and pass Boris Johnson's deal in the House of Commons, and now we see that Brexit is going to be happening. I think it's 31st of January, and then we're going to be moving into a transition period. It's like everyone thinks we're going to leave the EU on the 31st January means that's it. That's when everything stops. No, there's a transition period that is supposed to stay up until until December 2020, where they create those trade deals. And so, because the thing is, you have a deal, but that is a large framework for how they're going to negotiate further. And so the negotiations further are happening after January 31st. So now you have Boris Johnson, who's going to be in charge for the next 5 years, unless somebody calls another general election, and feel like he's going to be in charge of Brexit.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of issues there, I'm sure. I wouldn't be surprised if we get some more extensions and the like as we've seen over the past, but it seems Brexit's finally happening since 2016. I mean, I was in London when it happened. I remember everyone was like, "Oh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen?" But finally, now in 2020, we'll be moving from the EU, which is going to be quite the change considering they're the first country to do that. We'll just have to see how that affects the economy. But Boris won. He definitely won the election, which I was surprised, honestly, because I would assume after all this stuff that people would want to remain after all the drama that's been going on the last 4 years. But no, the British have spoken. Uh, they've cast their ballot for the Conservative Party. You know, I'm just surprised. I'm honestly surprised because I figured that majority of people I've talked to and interacted with, they would have voted to remain, and then they had a chance to remain again, I suppose, and they didn't. Labour got destroyed. They lost a majority of their seats. Yet the Brexit Party didn't win any seats, so they've gone with the Conservatives. I'm just flabbergasted. I truly am.
Yeah, okay. The thing is, you have the difference between Remainers and people who just want to get rid of Brexit. There's now this large group of people who are they don't like the Brexit discussion. It's not like they're either Remain to or leave. They just are sick of it because that's all everyone's been talking about for the last 3-4 years, just about Brexit and what's going to happen with Brexit. And people are sick of it, and people wanted Brexit done, and so that is what Boris Johnson's slogan was: "Get Brexit done," and people believed him. And so you have one of the big takeaways was the massive failure of the Labour Party and of Corbyn. He was not seen as a strong leader. He was not seen as somebody who could lead the party forward. And you had people during the election cycle come out and say that, well, I wouldn't trust, like, people, members of parliament who are Labour, like people in his own party coming out and saying, I wouldn't trust him to be prime minister. And it's things like that, and him unable to show strength as a leader just kind of bit him in the ass. It's but some people say it's unfortunate, but it's kind of, well, they never agreed on what they were going to actually do with Brexit. They were very much on the line of like, yeah, we'll kind of remain, we'll kind of leave, but we don't want to show, like, we don't want to say anything about it. So it was a very weak performance, and to be honest, from somebody who follows British politics quite closely, it was going to go one of two ways. You were going to have either Labour lose by a lot, or you were going to get a hung parliament. So either way, it was not going to. It was they were never predicted. They were never going to win a majority. So yeah. So do you want to talk about Boeing now? And I know. I'm great. I'm great at this. I'm great at this segue thing.
Transition thing. Yeah. So Boeing has announced that they will be ceasing the production of the Boeing 737 MAX 8, which was previously involved in two crashes that proved fatal. Yeah, Boeing has continually tried to bring the Max 8 back. You have airlines like Southwest, American, United, who have these aircraft that want to fly them domestically. They have purchased a lot of these aircraft. They're brand new, and they can't fly because of the software glitches. They tried to fix them. They were temporarily cleared by the what is it, FAA, and then they were shut down again. Boeing, his stock has tumbled since the announcement. They're spiraling, and now they're possibly losing to Airbus now, which is more and more companies might be moving towards Airbus, which is not good for U.S. companies, considering Boeing is a major U.S. company and also a major U.S. defense contractor, which hopefully that software glitch does not move over to military aircraft. But Boeing is kind of tumbling now, and I'm honestly not surprised. I am actually surprised that the FAA keeps clearing the aircraft, despite the fact that they clearly cannot fly. As every time they try, They have issues. It's just another example of the U.S. government trying to greenlight an American company, trying to bring the American company back, but it's clear they can't fly. It's clear that people don't feel safe. Southwest, when it happened, canceled flights like 6 months in advance, thinking, they'll just solve this problem, no big deal. And it's proven that they cannot, as difficulty with airline travels become, especially as how competitive it is with Boeing being competed by Airbus and Boeing are the main uh, aircraft producing companies that have been competing, and Airbus has been winning on the long haul planes, majority of the long haul planes. But Boeing's target was like, we're going to get the domestic aircraft, the transcontinental aircraft, the U.S. rest of the market, we're going to win. And instead, the Max 8 comes out, and you have two just horrific crashes within months of the aircraft existing and being in service. And now you're like, okay, our ticket to this market share has now been grounded.
And you also saw when I think it was a few months ago where Donald Trump put forward tariffs on Airbus to try to stop uh, what they perceive is the basically subsidies paid by the EU to Airbus, which are considered by the by the Trump administration to being basically just constantly just supporting Airbus. The thing is, Airbus has done a much better job. The Max 8 came out after Airbus released their aircraft. You have it's Boeing has been playing catch up for past 15, 20 years. And I wouldn't say it was inevitable because they just messed up with building a solid aircraft that can fly. And yeah, that just isn't good PR. As horrific as that sounds.
No, no one wants to fly on a plane that's been involved in two horrific crashes because the same instance happened. The same software caused that to happen. Just no one feels safe about that. It's understandable why people would go to Airbus because Airbus hasn't had this issue. With their domestic aircraft, they haven't had instances of the aircraft nose diving because it made because the pilot can't control the aircraft when it does this sort of maneuver, and it's concerning for the American company. It's quite concerning. But on a happier note, the FDA has just approved the first vaccine for Ebola that has been proven to be extremely effective. The vaccine called Ervebo was involved in a 2-year study conducted in Ghana. Conducted in Guinea. I apologize. During a Ebola outbreak several years ago, but has now been proven. The FDA has approved it. They've started to implement it into the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and it supposedly is extremely effective, which is fantastic. That'll be fantastic for reducing Ebola and the outbreaks that have continued to go on since 2015, 2016. It's a great first step, and hopefully we can work to eradicate that disease with a very effective vaccine that only is a one-time use, which will be just very very effective. So that's some really good news coming out of Eastern Africa and the United States that we're finally able to beat a disease that's been absolutely terrible and has been very horrific and caused a lot of heartache and a lot of pain to a lot of different people. Glad we can finally start to stabilize that region again.
Yeah, I agree. And moving on to another something else that's very hurtful and horrific is the extremely hot weather currently in Australia. I hope you enjoyed that, Bo. You definitely
I
did.
didn't. I was sad. It's sad.
Granted, it's not as bad as Ebola, but Australia currently has 100 active wildfires happening in their country, and you have and with global warming and it currently being summer, they have an average temperature of 40 degrees Celsius or 104 degrees Fahrenheit over the entire continent. Um, it is the hottest that it's ever been, and some experts say that it might get hotter later next week or the week after that. And that this is an issue with climate change. It's happening. It's happening right in front of us. And the big issue in Australia is that their prime minister, also known as the Australian Donald Trump, denies climate change and says that no, this heat isn't caused by that, or the wildfires aren't caused by climate change. Where you can clearly see that because of the global warming, the way that the climate has changed in Australia, and the way that because it's becoming a lot hotter, drier, and everything is becoming a lot more conducive to an outbreak of wildfires. And so that's exactly what's happening. And it's a bit sad that you've got leaders from all over the world like denying climate change, even though they signed on to the Paris Climate Accords. Everyone but two countries now. Well, America, the United States would is coming out of it, but hasn't officially come out of it yet. And then you also have Guatemala, who hasn't joined the climate accords, but Guatemala hasn't joined because they believe that those targets are too weak. So you have major polluters like India and China agreeing to this, and pushing forward to it, but you know it's where nothing's ever going to be enough to uh, to change everything entirely, which is quite a shame.
Yeah, I was seeing videos on the internet of Australian firefighters having to use the helicopters that dump water. They're having to go in people's pools to collect water to go fight the fires out in the outback. It's just same thing happened in California. As they've still been fighting instances of when the campfire was on the outbreak. That was just very dangerous and very deadly, and people were losing a lot of property and losing their livelihoods. And again, it's happening in Australia due to, as you said, climate change. And it's some of these things are preventable. We have legislation in place in most major countries. I know the United States has plans out there to help start to alleviate this pressure, but instead, politicians are choosing to focus on the economy. We're choosing to just deny it outright. And that's quite concerning for the future of our planet. As unfortunately, this is the only planet we got. So, we haven't cracked that whole Mars thing yet. So as we continue to, watch our planet like literally burn, we decide to attack climate change activists like Greta Thunberg for, trying to help. Oh, jeez. It's a little not very Christmas spirit on politics today. Very
Very
we have
festive.
some we have some real issues right now that not just the United States but the world is facing, and some pretty major decisions people around the world are going to start making. And really, as this podcast is a bunch of teenagers talking about things that are probably way above our pay grade, but whatever. We really
Nobody's
are
getting paid to do this podcast.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Please sponsor us. It really shows that like the people our age will be deciding kind of the fate of our planet. We've been handed or we've been dealt a pretty poor hand, and it's up to us to really change that. To solve our problems. And it brings me a lot of a lot of anxiety about the future. With issues going on, but it brings me a lot of hope that we can create Ebola vaccines, and we can we have a lot of candidates who, whatever side of the political aisle you're on, they care about the issues, and that's always comforting. So with that, we'd like to thank you for tuning in to this episode of Politics. Happy holidays, everybody.